welcome. Today's guest is a husband, father, author, sought-after international speaker and trainer, actor, poet, songwriter, master results coach, and the owner of Elite Success Systems, a personal development and human healing company that has transformed hundreds of thousands of lives around the world. Having survived a tragic accident, he has dedicated his life's work to creating neuro-transformation. Hailed as North America's next greatest speaker, he is one of the very few people to deliver 2 spoken word TEDx performances. Dear Racism, a breakup letter from a white man, and the power of vulnerability in men. He is passionate about helping men heal their masculine wounds, and he wrote and performed I Do, Mom, a powerful one-man show about his mommy issues. Committed to creating conscious conversations to help heal the racial divide, he co-wrote, produced, and starred with Lisa Nichols and David Bianchi in the award-winning spoken word short film, Let's Grow. Please welcome Sean Smith. Welcome, Sean. It's so great to have you here.
It is fantastic to be with you.
Wow, you have had quite a journey. You do so many things. How did you get started in personal development?
Yeah, it was actually really neat to hear you list, a lot of those things because it just took me back through so much of my journey. You mentioned the near-death accident. So when I was 13 years old, I was almost killed by a car as I was riding my bicycle. And the details of the accident, if you read the police report and all the details, I mean, I shouldn't have survived. And so I had this huge epiphany in the hospital room that night. I was just this 13-year-old kid, and I'd see the world. I had seen it through these, immortal lenses, I think, like a lot of us do. And then just like that, I was high on life, but I could have died. And so I realized that no matter where we are and no matter how amazing life is, no matter what our circumstances, we're not promised our next breath. And that fundamentally changed everything for me. It changed the way I looked at the world. It changed my thoughts on success. I made a promise to myself that if I don't know when my life is going to end, then I won't settle for mediocrity. And I changed lanes, like literally and figuratively that day. I started hanging out with different people and so forth. So that started my journey into the whole world of success, just, studying goal setting and thinking about different things and talking about different things. And then fast forward about 20 years, I was newly married and we had a couple kids at the time. And I was just kind of fumbling around, trying to find myself and bouncing around from, place to place. I had been a probation officer actually right out of high school, or right out of college rather. And then I was a teacher for several years inside of school. But once we had my daughter, who was our first child, I just didn't want to work. I didn't want to, I wanted to keep working, but I didn't want to have to peel her off of me in the mornings and go to school on somebody else's schedule. So that's what kind of got me into the whole world of personal development and self-employment and so forth.
I find it fascinating that at 13, when you had your accident, you got really clear on the fact that time is not promised. And the immortality of youth, shall we say, dissipated, and you got intentional about who you were hanging out with and how you were going to spend your time. And I find it fascinating that led to teaching and, working with the criminal justice system. And yet then it was the birth of your daughter. And again, time, not wanting to be on someone else's schedule. That's a really profound, actually, full circle moment. Going
Yeah.
back to that, this is the one thing that you can't get more of, that you don't know how much time you have, and really that you want to spend that time with your daughter. You want to be the one to be able to take her to school. You want to be the one to dictate how your time is spent. So I love that full circle moment and that tug that then ultimately led you to Jack and to knowing that you wanted more.
I love how you dissected that and put those together. It's so true. I mean, time is the thing that for all of us is going to continue ticking no matter what we do. If we try to resist it or we try to avoid it. And I think a lot of us, and I was doing this too, and I still fall in this pattern, as I'm sure most people do. We tend to want to skip over, whatever pieces of time we're not enjoying, whether that's a Monday through Friday, if somebody has a job, or difficult situations in family, or things that are just going on in our lives that we're not really liking the experience of. We tend to just want to get out of this moment in time and get to that moment in time, whatever that moment is, whether it's the weekend or a better place or when I lose 30 pounds or whatever it is. And that causes us to fall into a cycle of not being present. And if we're trying to get out of this moment for whatever reason, then even if we hit that moment, we're in a cycle of not being in the moment anyway. So then when the moment is quote unquote right for us to experience, we actually don't experience it at any kind of deep level because we're just constantly trying to get out of the moment. And then we're just basically, running from ourselves. And I know you believe this, like, that's just not the way I want to live life.
Yeah. Now, we know that life happens. Stuff is going to come up, stuff is going to get in the way. So when you know where you are and you know where you want to be and you know what that purpose is, how do you stay aligned?
The simple answer that I've learned is to get quiet. Life happens, as you said, and the way that our brain operates to understand what just happened to us and protect us from that ever happening again, and for us to retain our status and the way our ego works, we get really loud and we get really complicated. And then we tell ourselves stories. And the way a story works, like a belief inside of a human, is just like the way a lie works. If you tell a lie at some point in time, you're going to have to tell another lie to support the lie that you started. And then you're going to have to tell another lie to support those two. And in our lives, when we make stories up about what it means to be a man or what it means to be a woman or the danger of vulnerability or any of those stories that are all based on some kind of painful experience we had, at some point in time, we have to tell another story because the story that we created actually isn't the truth. It's just based on how we feel and we want to protect ourselves. So we start telling stories, then we tell another story, and then we tell another story, and then we tell another story. And pretty soon we've created this massively complicated human ecosystem in our brain. And we've got so many stories. It's like balloons up in the air and they're coming down. And our job feels like to not let any of them hit the ground, but literally there's hundreds. And so we're just constantly chasing balloons. We're constantly swimming in the complication of human protection. The answer to that is to not chase the complication. The answer to that is actually get quiet, get still. Sometimes it means just listen to the stories. If you just listen to the stories that you tell yourself, as an audience member, without trying to agree or not, or trying to justify or not, you just listen to the stories. Pretty soon, it's like they'll just start to melt, right? Because you'll recognize that's just a story. That's actually not the truth. And so the beautiful part of human transformation is that it happens with unlearning. It doesn't happen with learning. And so we need to let go of the layers that we've put on. We need to let go of the stories that we've been telling. And when we stop telling those stories and we let go of some of those layers, then we actually settle into who we really are. So I believe that this journey is really a journey back. It's not a journey forward toward anything. This journey of self development is really about undevelopment. It's about a journey back to authenticity, back to who we once were before we started telling these stories. And the best way to do that is actually to get quiet. That could be meditating. That could be just spending more time on your own. You know, one of the reasons that a lot of people get swept up in the complication of human existence and society is because we don't really know who we are. And if we don't know who we are, we don't have a strong self-concept, then we can't know where we fit, and we can't know what fits us, and we can't have anything to align with. You know, align is a relative term.
Yeah.
In order to be aligned, you have to be aligned with something. So in order for your goals and your beliefs and your dreams and your network of people and all those things to be aligned with your authenticity, you need to know what your authenticity is.
Yeah.
They need to be aligned with something. And the best way to find out what that something is or what that someone is to be quiet. So it'd be interesting to know if you found something similar to this. In all of my studies over 17 plus years now, the only common denominator that I've found with all across the board people talking about success, the only common denominator that I found is meditation.
Yeah.
That almost everybody who is successful, or at least is living the kind of life I want to live, almost everybody has some kind of meditative practice. It doesn't look the same for everybody. But if you think about affirmations or goal posters or nutrition or what have you, like a lot of those are ingredients in a lot of people's recipes, but meditation is the only one that I found. It's not in, you know, literally every single person, but it's by far the most common denominator. And I think the reason is because of the stillness. Like I said, let's get real and let's look inward and let's start listening to our own radio station, which has a lot to say if we listen to it, rather than everybody else's thoughts on podcasts and YouTube videos and books. And all that stuff is good, but it's still somebody else's thoughts. And so we need to start listening to our own thoughts. And that's going to be how we reconnect and reintegrate and realign with ourselves.
Yeah, I love what you're talking about of shedding the external, of stripping away all of those layers of the programming that we've picked up along the way, of the things that teachers told us, oh, well, you are this, or you should be this, or success looks like this, or that our parents told us, or that our religion told us, or that social media told us, or that the bully told us. Just all these little bits of programming that we have absorbed along the way that are then compounded by our day-to-day experiences and the stimuli, what we see in advertising, what we see on television, what we hear on the radio and on podcasts. And so I love the point of, to get clear, it's about getting still, coming home to yourself, stripping away all of the external, listening to yourself, coming home to yourself, asking yourself what you want, who you are, what you value. I love your point earlier about how you want to show up, what you want to demonstrate, what you want to model. Come home to yourself, because to your point, we know when we are still and quiet, the answers are within. And now I know so many of the audience is going to say, whoa, that sounds really scary. And what do you mean be still? And what do you mean meditate? And what do you mean feel the feelings? All of that sounds really scary. So what is a tip that you have for navigating that fear and that uncertainty? And what's the most important lesson that you personally have learned about overcoming fear?
Yeah, boy, you said a lot there in a relatively small amount of words. It is really scary for most of us to even think about going into the vulnerable void, going into that place of who we are, because we do get told constantly through a lot of the sources that you just mentioned who we are. And more than that, we get told who we're not. And so that becomes a familiar concept. I use the term self-concept, which is a really important term. That becomes a familiar self-concept. And then what happens is it morphs into this idea that we don't even know who we are, but we know who we're not. And even if we were able to dissolve the idea of who we're not, that still doesn't answer the question who we are. The good news is that's not anything we need to figure out. It's, as you said, it's just about coming back home. And when we start to dissolve and challenge all of the programming about who we're not, we are actually slipping back into who we are. And I think one of the key components to understand in personal development of any kind is how our brain actually operates in forming the behavior that we have. So in the context of this conversation, you mentioned fear, the fear of vulnerability, the fear of whatever, fear of speaking, fear of relationships, fear of being hurt again, fear of betrayal. We need to understand how our brain actually creates the fear. And one of the biggest misconceptions that I see, that I used to have, is that fear is a bad thing. And if we want to do anything in our lives, we need to get over that fear, or we need to dissolve the fear. We need to somehow reduce the effect of fear in our lives. And what we have to understand, this will be a huge shift for a lot of people if you really haven't dissected this concept of fear, what I'm going to talk about. Fear is a protective mechanism. What that means is something at some point in time, I tend to turn this way, and I'm going to talk about my past. Something in our past at some point in time happened, and we don't want it to happen again. So in order to protect from that happening again, we create a fear. It's like if you get bitten by a dog, your mind, which wasn't afraid of dogs before that, creates a fear of dogs now because you don't want to get bitten again. So we want to create a fear in order to protect, or we do create fear in order to protect. But here's the mind-blowing shift that I had recently. We only protect that which we love. So fear is created from and actually with love. The reason this is really important to understand is that most of us try to fight fear with everything but love, right? We try to fight it with anger or shame or urgency, irritation, right? If I could just get over this thing, and why are you so afraid? And none of that is actually going to dissolve what's dissolvable or embrace what's embraceable, because only love can do that. And this might, sound like a little woo-woo to some people, but we have to change the way we relate to fear. And when we change the way we relate to fear, it can become a teammate of ours rather than an opponent of ours. And most of us, I did this for most of my life, think that fear is an opponent that we got to fight against. We will never get rid of the human capacity or the human brain's desire to create fear. So trying to fight against your fear, it's just a useless thing to try to sign up for. You're never going to be able to do it. You're never going to be able to get rid of fear, but you can make peace with it. You can actually become partners with your fear. Fear is a phenomenal co-pilot. It's just a terrible lead pilot. So when we start taking action and we start to get more aligned, we have to listen to the fears that come up, because they will come up. And it's impossible for us to try to break through our comfort zone without fears showing up at the door like, are you sure about this? We don't know what's behind those walls over there. And you told us actually that everything back there is scary. So I'm going to do everything I can to keep you inside your safety zone, right? That's how fear works. It's trying to keep us safe. It's not trying to keep us losing. It's not trying to keep us settling. It's trying to keep us safe. So the only way to actually create a teammate from fear is to embrace its desire to keep us safe and then recognize that you, as the person who's growing, no longer need the protection that it once created for you because, and this happens as we're taking away all these layers that we've been talking about, because the thing that the fear showed up to protect isn't relevant anymore. And it isn't even you. It was a story that was created anyway, once upon a time. But because we don't understand how fear shows up, we don't challenge it. We let stories that we literally sometimes started when we were 4 years old, we let those stories evolve until we're 40 and 60 and 80. And we never sit and turn around and go, wait a second. What if I've actually outgrown the thing that early story was designed to protect me from? What if I do that? And so when we can relate to fear differently, then we actually have a chance to operate with it powerfully. And one final thing, we have this like simple surface level way to deal with fear in, this kind of meme world that we live in. And I'm sure most people have heard, false evidence appearing real. That's what fear stands for. I despise that acronym because it's not true. Fear is not false evidence. Fear, it might be a false story, but the fear that your body feels is not false. It's real. And if you take something that's real and try to just say that it's false and try to just power through it, you're not listening to your body. Fear is actually trapped in our bodies. So don't pretend it's not there. And that's what a lot of us are trying to do by just dismissing it. It's like if you have a child that has something to say and they're screaming at you, trying to get your attention, and you just dismiss them and turn around and try to avoid them, they're only going to scream louder. Your fears are not going to go away if you avoid them. It's about feeling them. Actually feel them. And the other thing is fear, just like all emotions, they can't last forever. The reason they do get trapped in our bodies is because we don't feel them. So the best thing we can do with our fear is feel it and explore it and play with it and turn into that child like you're trying to figure out how Play-Doh works, right? Turn into that child and go, I thought this and I felt this and I did that and I feel this and it's over here. And the more that we explore the real feelings, then we can become a vessel of emotional expression. And fear is no different than any other emotion. It has a shelf life in our body. And if we allow ourselves to feel it and we're not afraid of the fear, then it can flow through us. We can learn from it and it can actually strengthen us. But because most of us are afraid of our fear, it controls us.
Along your journey, you've been privileged to be mentored by some of the best. So what's been the most powerful piece of advice that you have learned from one of your mentors that now you embody, you model, and you pass along to the people that you serve?
Boy, it's tough to try to boil it down, but I'll give you what's on my mind as you ask that question. It's the main concept that I believe is so powerful is high intention, low attachment. And I learned this from Jack Canfield. I don't know if he created it or learned it from somebody else. High intention, low attachment is you have an intention on achieving something, feeling something, whatever your purpose is, you have an intention for that and you have an attachment to that much bigger game plan. But then you have low attachment to how you're going to get there. Most of us have the opposite. most of us have high attachment to how we're going to get there. And if anything shows up differently than what we had previously hoped it would look like, then we get scared.
Yeah.
And then we don't like the way we feel. And then we're afraid of our feelings, and all these things that we've been talking about kick in. And then we try to find our stability in the process.
Mhm.
And instead of recognizing, it's like if you have somewhere to go that's 5 miles away and there's a 30-car wreck on the freeway that otherwise would be the way to go, would you just sit there? And let's say you have to be at a wedding that starts at a certain time. You're just going to sit there and just wait for the cars to be pulled off the road? No, you're going to find a detour because you actually have commitment to getting to the wedding. You're more committed to getting to the wedding than you are to going on this freeway.
Yeah.
But in life, we tend to not do that, right? We're committed to the freeway. Yeah. We're committed to what's on that path. And that causes us to be really rigid. And it actually causes us to not trust ourselves. You know, going back to this whole conversation of fear, we're so rigid with the rules that we're not supposed to be afraid that when fear does show up, we don't know what to do with it. And then we stay stuck. And, you know, I mentioned the acronym, false evidence appearing real. My acronym is face, embrace, ask, and release. It goes back to what you said about curiosity. Just ask. Ask the voice. What do we have to be afraid of? And actually, when you ask yourself, when you sort of challenge the internal voices that you have, you'll be able to discern between them.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to tell that some voices are actually just designed to be afraid of everything that moves. And some voices are designed to be afraid of settling. And some voices are designed to say, I'm not telling you not to go there, but don't go there in that lane because this lane is better. So we need to be able to discern who we are and our own voices. And then back to this high intention, low attachment idea. What happens is most of us get the idea that this is the way to succeed, whatever this way is, whether we're talking about losing weight or romantic relationships or being successful as a coach or a speaker or making money or whatever. We get so rigid with the path. And then the problem is we only trust the path. That's one of the reasons why so many people, especially in the personal development world, ask how-to questions. How do I get over my fear of speaking? And I'm one, and I'm sure you're like this, Ellie. It's like, well, what's your fear of speaking? There's no such thing as just a one-size-fits-all approach to remove an individual issue. I need to know how you tied your knot in order to help you untie it. But too many people are asking universal questions. How do you as a human, how do we do this? And what that does is it creates trust only in the terrain. Meaning, if you'll tell me exactly what's in the terrain, what's on the path, what's on the road, then I can pack for it properly. Then I can make sure I'm prepared for it. I can put in my backpack everything I'm going to need. And if you tell me where the potholes are, then I can go around. But what that does actually is it decreases trust in self. And so what most of us are doing is we're trusting the terrain instead of trusting the traveler. So the more that we can take this high intention, low attachment concept and apply our external attachments to internal attachments, instead of trusting all the things and everybody out there, we trust ourselves. You know, I always like to say, if you know you got to go around a corner, you can't see what's around the corner, but you know you will be there. So what if your trust was in yourself? What if you trusted your resiliency? Right? I believe that your getting back up muscle is way more powerful and important than your never get knocked down muscle. Because as you said earlier, life is going to knock you down. And if you're afraid of getting knocked down, then you're going to walk differently in the world. And you're always going to be concerned about what might knock you down. And then everything becomes dangerous. But if you walk in the world knowing that your attachment is out there, what you want, your purpose, your alignment, your vision, and you start going, those things won't be able to knock you down because of the way that you're walking in the world. And even if they do knock you down, but you trust yourself to get back up, then they don't become scary. It's like, have you ever, Ellie, I know you travel a lot, obviously. Have you ever been in the airport and you see that your gate is, like maybe 500 feet away or something? And if you look up at your gate and you just focus on the gate, you can have your bags behind you and you just focus on the gate. You're actually looking above people. If you do that, almost nobody bumps into you.
Yeah.
Because there's just like this energy, like I know where I'm going.
Yep.
And people can see that and they just kind of naturally move. But if you see your gates way over there, but then you take your eyes off of it and you look at all the people that are in your way, you'll bump into almost all of them because you're trying to avoid the people instead of focusing on where you're going. That's a real powerful visualization of high intention, low attachment versus low intention, full attachment to all the things that are in our way. So hopefully that's a visual that, and for any of you that like the next time you're in the airport, do that. I've had so many clients actually do that and just say, look at your gate and go and see what happens. And even if people do bump into you, it's no big deal because you're going to keep going. And if we could change that energy in life and apply it to all of our endeavors, it's almost unfathomable what we can actually achieve, but not only achieve, enjoy along the way.
Yeah, I absolutely love your point about trusting yourself, not the directions, not the steps, not the process that somebody gives you. Because when you become dependent on well, how do I do this? What's the first step? What's the second step? What's the third step? When do I go right? When do I go left? How far down the road? Then you are so dependent on each of those things.
Yeah.
As opposed to developing your resiliency muscle that you mentioned, that developing your intuition, developing your ability to get still, developing your ability to be present, the ability to feel and navigate, and all the things that we've talked about in this discussion. I love that you brought it all home to really developing the skills within you.
Yeah, it's everything.
Now, how can people get in touch with you? How can they learn more about your programs? How can they work with you? Where can they find you?
Everywhere online, I am Coach Sean Smith. So that's my YouTube channel, it's Instagram, it's Facebook. My website is coachseansmith.com.
So before we end today, Sean, any parting words for the audience?
Yeah. I'm going to share my father's parting words to me, who he passed away about 11 years ago. And in our final conversation, I asked him what wisdom he could pass on. How can I live his legacy, my legacy? And with no hesitation, Ellie, and he was all drugged up at the time. He had pancreatic cancer, and so his body was failing him. But even through all the drugs and the circumstances, just with no hesitation, he said, Shawnee, be who you can be, do what you can do, and live a good life. So to everyone else listening to this, be who you can be, do what you can do, and live a good life.
Amen. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for all of the good that you do in the world, for how you show up, for all of the things that you model, for your presence and your power and your grace and your vulnerability, and the tens and tens and tens of thousands of people that you serve on a regular basis, and to the millions of people that you serve around the world. We thank you.
Thank you, Ellie. It's an honor.
Till next time.